Just because you don't take insurance doesn't mean your clients can't use it. Mentaya is an out of network billing platform that gets clients to get back 70% back on therapy without the therapist lifting a finger. I've checked out their product and it's truly a game changer. It's what I wish I had in my private pay practice. They handle literally everything so you can focus on what matters therapy. Go to practiceofthepractice.com/Mentaya to try it out for free. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/MENTAYA to get started for free. Mentaya is amazing if you have private pay clients that want to bill their insurance. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 952. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so glad you're here. We do this podcast to help you have a thriving practice you absolutely love. We want you to thrive financially. We want you to be at whatever scale you want to be, whatever full looks like, but not at the expense of hating life or being burned out. We want you to love it. We want you to enjoy the opportunity you have to have a private practice. And so we bring in guests here 2 or 3 times a week to just chat through what it means to have a thriving practice we love. And we cover a lot of different angles. Over the last 2 months or so, we've been talking to 7-figure practice owners, and that 7-figure practice club application closed at the end of January. So if you are a 7-figure practice owner, hopefully you got your application in. And if you didn't, we'll do that in the next round. We'll invite you in then. Or maybe you're not quite there yet and you're dreaming of when you're at that 7 figures. You can join 7-figure practice club when you're there. Well, today I am so excited. I have Jenn Fredette with us, and Jenn is a relational, psychodynamic-oriented, attachment-based, loving, Jungian concept adoring, and existential thinking psychotherapist based in the DC metro area. I'm just proud of myself for getting through that amazing description. In addition to her clinical work, Jenn partners with psychotherapists who want to market with depth, not just offer quick solutions to get people in the door. Jenn, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks so much for having me and for getting through the tongue twister of my bio. I'm impressed.
I think it's great to have sort of like a barrier to entry there to see how serious the podcasters are.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's just start with tell us about your clinical work and then how you got into messaging and marketing. Would love to hear just first clinically a little bit of your story, and then we'll dig into more around kind of the marketing core of what we're going to chat about today.
Yeah. So I think, like a lot of people, I went to grad school. I dreamed of sitting in a really comfortable chair, having people pay me not a lot of money to just get to listen to people's stories. And it turns out licensure, it's pretty hard to go straight into private practice if straight out of grad school. So, like a lot of people, I went into agency work and liked that, but found that it didn't really let me do the kind of therapy I wanted. And so I spent, it feels like decades, doing a ton of research, joining all the Facebook groups, listening to podcasts, trying to figure out how do I branch out and get to do this thing that I've been dreaming of, as opposed to writing a ton of Medicaid treatment plans and progress notes. And so when I finally went out on my own, I attempted to do all of the marketing things, SEO and Google ads, and have a website and have many different therapy directory profiles. Therapy Den was just coming out when I was getting started, and Psych Today, and all of these things. And I found that the more marketing I did, the less successful things seemed to be, and the more stressed out and the more scarcity really entered in, that I really was scared I wouldn't be able to make it.
And at that time, how did you define marketing? Like when you say you did marketing that like didn't help, how were you thinking through
Yeah.
marketing at that point?
I think at that point, marketing, it's interesting. It didn't have a clear definition. It was like, you have to do all of these different activities to build a practice. It's all marketing, going out on networking dates, all of these marketing actions, but it wasn't really clear how they all worked together. And I was finding myself being just really burned out in doing all of the private practice building as opposed to doing what I really wanted to do, which was to sit with clients and be present to their stories and their heartbreak and the ways that they wanted to continue to grow and heal.
Mm.
So marketing didn't have a definition, which was not helpful at the time.
Yeah. So where'd you go from there?
So I don't know that burnout is a great way to enter into success, but I burned out. I couldn't figure out how am I actually going to make this work. And so I basically just took a step back and thought maybe if I just try to manifest success and sit on my sofa and read Regency romance novels and the clinical books that I had been putting off, maybe somehow that would magically work. Spoiler, it did not. It was a fun time to be able just to sit and rest, but it didn't actually move me forward. What it did do was reintroduce me to the power of story, whether it was in a fun novel to read or I really love like clinical case studies that like psychoanalysts write and tell you the story and bring you into the room of how they engage with clients. And so when I came back to my marketing, I knew I couldn't do all of the things because I just frankly didn't have the time, energy, or financial resources to continue to invest in all of it. So I pared down and I focused on thinking about how did I actually want to talk to the future clients that I wanted to work with, which brought me to content marketing, which really, when we talk about marketing in general, we're really talking about messaging. When we talk about content marketing, how do you say who you are, what you have to offer in a way that really resonates with the kinds of people you want to work with?
So that's how you would define messaging is that creation of how you want to talk to people about who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, not just creation, I think, but really being able to articulate how you already do that. I think the other thing that I don't know that I couldn't hold it. Maybe I just didn't know at that point that it felt like marketing, I had to mimic others in how they talk and how uh, they engage. And so a lot of my marketing before I came back to it in that second round was just trying to mimic what other people around me who looked successful were doing. And it just
Mm.
didn't work for me because it wasn't authentic to who I am.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because, I know that you were on Allison Pereira's podcast and Allison and
Mhm,
I are friends. And, her Instagram, she sometimes has wigs on and she does silly
mhm,
things and she has all this energy. And I feel like
mhm,
as a person, I have a lot of energy. I do improv and stuff, but that really doesn't make its way into my marketing or maybe professional image.
mhm,
And for a
mhm,
while, I thought, like, man, why can't I be more like Allison? Like, she does such a
mhm,
good job of engaging people. But then I realized, like, I don't follow people that do that on Instagram.
mhm.
I don't tend to enjoy that. And it was like as soon
Yeah.
as I realized Allison does that great, we don't need a male version of Allison doing that. We need
Mhm,
Joe to show up as Joe. And so I think
mhm.
I'm really glad that you say that because I think that that's so common when you're just getting started or even after you've been around for a while to see other successful people and say, "Oh, should I be doing that?"
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard because if you see them and they're successful and you're not yet, it feels like, well, I should just do what successful people are doing. I think on top of that, in my clinical training as a therapist, and I think it's true for a lot of people, self disclosure is this really taboo word. Like, don't self disclose, like, don't, which I am pretty seasoned. I've been practicing for almost 13 years now. Like, self disclosure is an important therapeutic tool. It's also an important marketing tool. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and tell people, I don't know, the stuff you just processed in therapy a week ago, but it is about being able to bring who you are forward, which in marketing, we talk about that in terms of branding. Like, how is it recognizable that you're Joe Sanok versus Allison Pereira versus Jenn Fredette? We all have distinctive ways of showing up in our marketing because we're individual people who have built these businesses.
Mm. So where should people start when they're thinking about their messaging, when they're thinking about marketing? Sometimes, similar to what you just said, it feels like, okay, I've got my Psychology Today, I've got my website, I've got social media, I'm using maybe even AI to help with some of my content.
Mhm.
Where should people start in regards to even just like thinking about their messaging and their marketing?
I think it's really important to start with identity. And for me, I really like going deeper than just how do you want to be perceived? Who do you want? What projection do you want to craft for people, whether it's in the clinical consult room or out in your marketing? And I think for a lot of therapists, we've had the experience that our voices have been silenced, whether that's in childhood, emotionally unhealthy family relationships, whether that's through various societal ways that some voices are elevated over others. And often we're mimicking others because there's a way in which we've been told that our voice is not okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think, there's so many times that we second guess our voices. And if anything, right now, I think that at least what I see mostly in the podcast and influencer world is there's so many self proclaimed experts that don't have
Mhm.
any training that
Yeah.
sometimes we feel like, when we enter those spaces, that we have to be like them or we don't want to be like them. And instead, a lot of us are so highly trained, and I think that self-disclosure side is so hard for us to then take the clinical words and make it into something the regular person wants to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting, Joe. It's making me think about when I first was getting started. And of course, I needed to be in supervision to gain my, to work towards clinical licensure. And I remember I would do things and I'm like, I'm definitely not going to tape this session because, whoa, who knows what my supervisor would say about this. I'm like totally going off book. I'm not following the rules. And I think I wasn't doing any harm by clients, but there was a way in which me showing up more authentically as myself in the clinical room even could feel threatening of how I imagined supervisors or colleagues would view that. And I say that because I think that often happens when we're talking about messaging and marketing. And to come back to an even more concrete definition of messaging, this is just the words that you're using to show up in your marketing. Like you have to write actual words, even if you mostly do, I don't know, like memes, using Allison as an example. Even if you're using memes, there's still going to be words involved and a voice involved in how you're um, bringing forward that marketing. And so we have to pay attention to the ways in which we have silenced our voice and what it is that we actually say, especially to the clients that we really want to work with, who are our right fit client, the person who can really take in what it is we have to offer. And so if we can get to that place, some of the other stuff that I'm about to share matters and is helpful and is a container for your marketing journey, but your voice is the most important part.
Hmm. That's awesome. Now, I know that you have a framework that you teach called Paths. So will you take us through kind of what that is and how people can enact that?
Sure. So I got to admit, I did not come up with this. Direct conversion copywriters have these beautiful formulas of like, here's how you write sales copy, essentially. And before all of the healers listening are like, oh, I don't know about sales. Like, sales is just another word for being able to intervene to call people to the healing journey that you're going to open up for them when they start to work with you. So, what I really like about PADS is it allows us to do what we already do clinically with people. And PADS, this formula is problem, agitate, discredit, solution. And so when you're
Oh, I
writing,
totally said that wrong. For some reason, I thought it was paths. Okay, pads. Pads. Okay.
yeah, I kind of like paths. Like Joe, if I was quicker on my feet, I would have like come up with a new rubric for it. But unfortunately, I'm not that quick on my feet. Have me on again. Maybe I'll come up with something new.
Sounds good.
So pads, let's use something like a Psych Today profile. Most therapists have them if they're in private practice, even whether you take insurance or your private pay. What we want to do is not respond to all of the prompts that Psych Today is suggesting that you respond to. in part because you're going to sound like everybody else. And also, it's not tailored for the people that you actually want to work with. So when we're talking about pads, it always helps me to have a person in mind who I'm going to write to. Joe, could you pick a person I could write a Psych Today profile to?
Yeah, middle-aged men that have recently been divorced.
It's a beautiful niche. Let's go a little bit deeper.
Going in network with insurance can be tough. I know when I took insurance, there were long wait times and it was so confusing. Filing all the right paperwork is time consuming and tedious, and even after you're done, it can take months to get credentialed and start seeing clients. That's why Alma makes it easy and financially rewarding to accept insurance. When you join their insurance program, you can get credentialed within 45 days and access enhanced reimbursement rates with major payers. They also handle all of the paperwork from eligibility checks to claims submissions and guarantee payment within 2 weeks of each appointment. Once you've joined Alma's insurance program, you can see clients in your state of licensure, regardless of where you're working from. It's amazing to know that you can be fully online. Learn more about building a thriving practice with Alma at helloalma.com/Joe. That's hello, ALMA.com/Joe to get started.
So, what does this person watch on TV when they come home from work?
The news or like some sort of dystopian Netflix TV show.
Oh, okay. So there's a lot going on in the news. I don't know, maybe always. Are they, why are they watching the news?
Why are they watching the news? Maybe because they're concerned about the world. They're a single parent, and I'm basically describing myself. So,
Okay.
spoiler alert.
It happens. It
Yeah, yeah,
happens.
yeah. Let's see. Maybe they also watch stand up comedy on Netflix too. But
Okay.
usually I would say it's not till like after the kids are in bed and it's probably 9 and like you're just you're just tired and want some sort of escape, but also feel like you're connected to the world.
Okay. I hear that. Who's the comic on Netflix?
Oh man, I don't care. Like I feel like I look for specifically like diverse comics that aren't your typical. So ones that often have insights into cultures that I'm not a part of.
Joe, I got to reveal to you and your audience, I am terrible about watching TV. I joke with my clients, I read all of the recaps, but I very rarely actually sit down and watch TV. So you're going to have to help me out with some potential people
Oh,
or
I
like a
mean,
dystopian show
oh,
you
I
might
don't,
watch on
oh,
Netflix.
geez. So like 1899 was an interesting one. That
Okay.
was one that was about this barge in 1899 that had a bunch of different people on it. I don't know. Like we've been rewatching Lost from the early 2000s because it's just such an interesting show.
Okay. So I want to just model for your audience part of what I'm doing. And I said to you, you gave me a beautiful niche. And often in marketing, you'll hear you need a niche. Absolutely 100% you need a niche. You cannot serve all people. When you are working on your copy, it's really helpful to have an ideal client avatar. And people often mix niche and ICA up. They think they're either the same thing, or if I have an ideal client avatar, that is literally the only person I can work with. Joe Sanok is my ideal, like I have just a practice of one. And that's not actually true. But when we can really distill down into the individual, we start to reveal the universal. So your messaging is going to really resonate with so many more people. It also allows us to start to thread things in that somebody reads your Psych Today profile and is like, how did you know that I was watching that at 10:59 p.m. While my kids are in the other room sleeping? And oh my gosh, I have to like hit the volume down really quickly because that was so much louder than I was expecting. Like these kinds of images where people feel seen is part of what starts to draw people in to wanting to work with us because they feel known even before we know them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So coming back to our middle-aged guy, single parent, watching TV after the kids go to bed, either the news or it sounds like
Some sort of
being
escapism type thing where it's an interesting story or some comedy.
okay. Is the comedy dark?
Not usually. I mean, I think
Okay.
really, I mean, I only watch probably half an hour to maybe an hour of TV if I do watch it. So
Okay.
for me, that's maybe not like the best, most compelling example. But if we were going to focus on just creating a business avatar, then
Mhm.
sure.
Okay. So I'm going to take some of the heat off you and I'm going to add in and make up my own ICA so you don't
Cool.
have to reveal more than you want to.
Well, I
I,
went there. So like I think it's entertaining for the listeners to be like, oh, that's what Joe in the same way that you're saying if someone reads a Psychology Today profile, if someone else is watching
mhm,
1899 and their mind is blown, then those two
mhm,
people that are watching it right now, they're gonna have a little more of a connection with Joe Sanok.
mhm. So I like that. But now we're going to get to the really like the vulnerable piece. Because when we're talking about a Psych Today profile, we're talking about why does somebody need to go to therapy? Most people are not going to be scrolling through Psych Today just for kicks and giggles, right? They're not, people aren't seeking our service as a luxury always. It might feel like a luxury, but most people are in a lot of pain when they're looking for a therapist. And that's the first part of PADS is we need to name the problem and not the problem that you, I, any other therapist would look at and be like, clinically, what's going on is this. I really think it's, I don't know, family of origin stuff or complicated grief due to a divorce or whatever it might be. We don't want to name it clinically. We want to name what the client is actually able to acknowledge. So often this would be the presenting problem on the first phone call. What is tricky is therapists really want to believe that most clients will self diagnose when they first get on that phone call. That I'm really struggling with a lot of anxiety. I think it's based in social situations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Most people don't do that when you pick up the consult call. Most people will tell you, I am going through a really painful breakup. I just have been crying all the time. I just don't know what to do. And so we have to be able to name the problem of why this person is searching for therapy. So just hearing a little bit about your person, I I'm imagining the problem is that he might be lonely, that there's so much on his plate. He stays busy all day at work to provide for his kids. When he's with his kids, he really wants to be present. He wants to show up and be the kind of dad that he dreamed of being when they were small. And it's getting harder and harder as they get older. And there's not a lot of time for him. It's only 30 minutes while he sits on the sofa before he has to go to bed and do it all again in the morning. That can be really lonely to be the person who is always working to take care of everybody else. And so if I was writing the Psych Today profile, I would probably start with some way of talking about the loneliness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So once we go from we have the problem that the client is going to be able to like, yes, I identify with that. The next step is really to uh, in pads they talk about agitating, and so it's sort of like poking at the problem. Ugh, as a therapist, I don't love that language. I much prefer to talk about it as we're going to amplify the problem. And so
Hmm.
we do this clinically, right? Like when somebody comes in with something like, yeah, but it's not really that big of a deal. I'm fine. And then you start to pull it apart. You're like, whoa, actually, I don't know that that's fine. That sounds really painful. And here's all of these layers. And we want to do that in our copy too. So I actually started to do that, right? As I was describing the problem, like here he works all day. He only has 30 minutes to himself. I already started to step into amplifying that problem to be able to paint a picture that people are able to see like, oof, that is really hard. Like, yeah, I've been trying to ignore that. I've not been paying attention to it. It is really difficult. And so the next step after we've amplified the problem is to really Again, in PADS, it's discredit. So the idea is you're going to discredit all of the things that the person has already tried that hasn't worked. I like to think of it as validating. Look at all of the things that you have tried, and it's really hard that those things haven't worked. So maybe in our story, the person that we're talking about has tried a lot of things. Like maybe he's joined is a pickleball league a thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe he's joined a pickleball league. He's tried catching up with old friends from college to see if they can get together, but it's really tricky in trying to coordinate custody schedules. Maybe he is even thinking about joining a book club, but when does he have time to go to a book club? And really, is it actually just then a secret way that he might have to date people? He doesn't know if he wants to date people yet. So whatever it is, we want to validate, here are all the things that you have tried to be able to solve this problem of loneliness. And then we get to the place where therapists, and I think marketers in general, when we get to solution, we want to say, hey, the solution is me. Pick me. I'm the solution. I will help you. And the thing is, I am not the solution to anybody's problem. You are not the solution to anybody's problem. The solution is whatever the solution is. So for loneliness, it would be more grounded connection with people who feel safe and good and fun for our person. That's the solution. What my offer is, which is what comes after, is I'm going to hold space for you as you go on a journey towards this solution. You following?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm going to give you the super secret ninja tricks too to like wrap this all up. So when we have the core of whatever piece of copy we're writing, we're talking about a Psych Today profile, but could be a Facebook ad, this could be a blog post, this could be a sales page, it could be all sorts of things depending on what the container is. At the bottom, we want to have a very clear call to action, and it's not fancy. It's super simple. Like the podcast call to action is always something like, please rate, review, and subscribe, right? I think I've heard that on every single podcast I've ever listened to. So that's whatever your call to action is. It's not going to be fancy. It's probably going to be kind of generic because most people's call to action will be similar. For therapists, it almost always is contact me or schedule on my website your free 15 or 20-minute consult call. Like that's typically our call to action for a piece of copy like this. So you want to make sure that you tell people very directly and concretely, here's the next step for you to take. And people drop that all of the time. I'll read beautiful marketing messaging, whether it's somebody selling me something or I'm looking at Psych Today profiles and I don't know what to do next. Like, I might want to work with this person. What do I do? And if I know the flow, if I've been in therapy a while or I'm a therapist, I know the next step is to go schedule a consult. But most people don't know that that's the next step. And so we want to be really clear in what they need to do next.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece that is the last piece you write, because it is the hardest piece, is what's called the hook. And the hook is the way that we capture somebody's attention and draw them in to be like, ooh, I got to read more. Like, tell me. And hooks are hard because they need to fit with your problem, but they also have to be juicy enough that somebody's going to want to keep reading. One of my students recently who works with young professional women in their 20s and 30s who have complex PTSD, like difficult families of origin with a lot of emotional trauma. Her hook, which I'm obsessed with right now, is basically your mom sends you a text message and it sounds innocuous, like, hey, honey, how are you? I really miss you. And it churns your stomach. And so here's the story. I'm like, why does it churn her stomach? Like, that sounds like a fine text. I want to know more. Tell me more. So it brings in more people, even if they might not be your ideal client avatar in your niche. They're curious. They want to read more. It also has the impact of letting somebody be seen from the very first words they read from you. So that's PADS in a nutshell.
So awesome. I feel like we could go on for quite a ways or quite a while there. Um, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
This is such a therapist answer, Joe. I think every private practice, every therapist really, I think you should go to therapy. Um, there's a way in which this work, whether it's building your practice or just showing up and being therapist, is beautiful, it's meaningful, and it's hard. And we need to be held as much as we hold others.
So awesome. Well, I know you have a free workshop that you're providing to the
Mhm.
listeners, full caseload unlocked. Will you tell us a little bit about that and how people can access that?
Yeah, I would love to. So, as you and your listeners probably can tell, I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours. And there's a great marketing device called a webinar in which you get to talk. It's only actually 57 minutes, I think, total, but you get to talk about all the stuff that you want to be able to offer for me, for private practice therapists who really want to build a caseload that feels full, not only on your schedule, but in your heart and your bank account, that it feels financially and relationally rich. And so, if people are wanting to build that kind of practice, I'd love for them to check out the free workshop. They can go to athinkersguide.com/POP. Yeah. So, I'd love for them
Awesome.
to check that out. And they can also check me out on Instagram. I do not wear wigs in the reels I make, um, but there can only be one Allison Perrier. So
They're absolutely true. Well, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
thanks.
I love frameworks like that help us just think through different ways that we can speak, that we can share what we're doing. I think that sometimes as therapists, we still have this, if we build it, they'll come, that, therapy is something that, so many people need, and we hear about therapist shortages, and we think if we just put a website up that all of a sudden magically people are going to show up. But if that's not happening for you, this is a great way to think through improving your directories, improving your website. We often talk about the pain to transformation formula of just describing the pain and what's the transformation you see in therapy. So love having extra tools like this to think through our copy, our messaging, our marketing. And, we couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors like Alma. Alma is our sponsor for today's show, and going in network with insurance can be so difficult. Alma does such an amazing job helping you get credentialed, helping you get access to enhanced reimbursement rates. They also handle all the paperwork from eligibility claims to claim submissions. You can check out more over at helloalma.com/Joe. That's helloalma.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting us into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.